What is going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me on this Tuesday evening. I don't do a lot of streams anymore, so I like to make them count when I do them. And who else to have on post draft than Jason Aponte? He comes on my channel. I would say like once a year, maybe do like a little bit of something. And I figured since you were covering the draft, why not get your uh, expertise, your feeling about how everything went? I didn't study up much on the draft. But I've been watching a lot of stuff that other people do and cover, and a lot of people kind of gave this draft a decent, actually a kind of a decent grade, especially with the Pearsall pick. And so I just wanted to kind of, and for the next like 30 minutes or so, just kind of get inside Jason Aponte's brain. But how are you doing, by the way? It's been a while.
I'm great. I'm great, man. On the East Coast, it's always good to be here, and yeah, exciting time. It's kind of at a point now where we can forget the Super Bowl a little bit, and now we can focus on the next season and get excited about these prospects.
Forgetting the Super Bowl. I don't know if I could do that, but I'm going to try. How the first pick for Pearsall, Pierce, I don't even know how to say his name. Pearsall, whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, Shocked a little bit. I'm thinking tackle at 31, but then again, you reach if you're just like dead set on a tackle if it's not somebody who's better than what you currently have. So receiver definitely wasn't in my mind at 31. But that's where they went. What's your overall kind of synopsis and feeling about Ricky Pearsall?
I think at 31 was a really good spot for a wide receiver as well too. I think when you look at the way that this draft played out, they were able to get themselves offensive line help as well too. A lot of people were dead set on the idea of, well, I've seen this mock with a bunch of tackles and the team need and everything, but when you watch this play out, each pick after the first pick justified the pick before that. So when you think about it, the 49ers need secondary help. Well, they round back in the second round there. Then they get an offensive lineman in the third. So if you were saying the first three picks were going to be wide receiver, corner, offensive line, you feel pretty good about that. As far as Pearsall being a bit of a reach, I think there were a lot of people that had 31 at a spot where the 49ers could take a wide receiver. They just didn't have Pearsall's name there. And when you look at a lot of the big boards in terms of where the prospects were, he's a top 40 guy. So I don't know if this is a reach because 31, 40, close enough. You weren't going to be able to double back and get him in the second round without a significant trade up. So when you look at it, it was a position of need because the way I'm thinking about it is you have the big three, but if Debo Samuel goes down, does anybody want to see Chris Conley out there on the field or Ronnie Bell or right? Like there's a way to justify this pick as a future pick, but also strengthening your receiver room today. So if Debo Samuel does go down 1, 2, 3 games as he tends to do during the season, your offense doesn't look like, pardon my French, complete shit at times. Now
Yeah,
you have a guy who can get themselves open and actually touch the ball and do well. So they like what Pearsall can do. He can play a little bit of Z. He can play a little bit of X. He can play a little bit of slot, but he's an ultimate separator. And I think the biggest thing is Kyle Shanahan looked at what happened in the Super Bowl and said, I had too many guys that couldn't get open. I'm done with that. And we all know that pass protection is threefold. It's the line, it's the quarterback, and it's the separators. And that's what this theme of this draft is.
I think that a lot of people, including myself, didn't know and really understand until after the Super Bowl when I was done, you know, dwelling on it and being depressed about it, that the Niners got locked up really good in that Super Bowl by those corners. Chiefs corners are pretty damn good. And uh, Spagnuolo went in there with a game plan in it, and they Niners didn't look like their usual self. And if you look at kind of this pick and even the pick of I forget his name, Cowder,
Jacob
yeah,
Cowing.
Cowing, they're both guys that have wiggle that can get open in short space, like little space, especially with Pearsall. A lot of people are saying he can't get off the break, but that's been proven wrong. And now you just look at him as a route runner, and he looks amazing. He's faster than a lot of guys we have, which is something. As much as I loved Brandon Ayuk, he's not exactly a burner. Um, and then when you talk about, like you said, Debo Samuel, I love Debo to death, but like any other guy that's on this team that gets hurt a lot, you're not of any help when you're not on the field. And so, like, double dipping and kind of in a way getting better, like you said, for the present time, and then also getting better for what's probably to come next year, which is a chance that they could move on from both Juwan Jennings and Debo. Uh, you don't want to draft for need, but that's just the way their board fell. And I'm actually like my brother, who's a Dolphins fan. It's all about speed in Miami. These two guys are not our typical type of receiver that we have on our team. So it looks like a philosophy change to me a little bit. Like maybe there's a little bit more speed added to this offense, and not so stationary, not so like within a box, so to speak. Because Purdy does stretch the ball, but for the most part, the Niners have a similar offense that they did to Garoppolo, which is like a 10 to 12 yard kind of box that they kind of live in a little bit. So, be interesting to see with these quick guys, especially Pearsall, how this offense kind of evolves. I'm actually kind of excited because more weapons. Why not? You know what I mean? Like if all the talk about who's getting traded and this person's getting traded. I mean, we all fell for it. It helps clicks. It helps engagement. And it didn't happen. Some people are still fishing for clicks with it, and it's like I don't think it's going to happen. But this receiving room right now in late April, early May looks pretty damn good. But we got to get to the game one, hopefully with no injuries, before we can see how special this group can be. So
Yeah, 100%. I think philosophy change is the biggest part of this entire draft. Coverage, secondary, no defensive linemen, speed, separators, and actually being able to combat some of the more explosive offenses. Like all of these things are for better or worse, whether this works out, you still can't fault the 49ers for doing the same thing over and over and over. And they realize that all of this is possible when you have the quarterback. Finally, they have a quarterback that they know for a fact that they can turn this over to and that's going to be here for a while. And when you do that, you can make these sorts of picks. You can make this sort of draft happen and you focus on the things that you need to strengthen. The defensive line, obviously underwhelmed. You bring in a bunch of veterans. Now, how do you combat that if your defensive line has a little bit of struggle? You cover better on the back end. Hey, your offensive line may struggle. You know what? We got a guy who's going to get the ball out, and now we have natural separators to get the ball out. Pass protection is always going to be threefold. I
yep.
have a hard time banging my head against the wall trying to explain this to people. It's not just linemen, it's quarterback knowing to get the ball out, it's separators being able to get the ball thrown to them. And every single good line, you still cannot hold the football back there. This is all part of the plan. It may not be the way people wanted it, but sticking to what they were doing obviously wasn't good enough to get it done, the full thing. And now they are taking a different approach while looking into the future. I am refreshed by this whole new philosophy change.
Are you of the mindset that maybe defense doesn't win championships anymore, and that offense uh, maybe is the key, or do you still prefer the Niners' way of going up? Because right, they didn't draft any defensive linemen, right? Very shocking for me because it's like they're obsessed with it, kind of like running backs, which they did draft, but no D linemen and no OT, no offensive tackles. So yeah, it's interesting to me that I never really thought of it as guys getting open quicker. That helps the offensive line, but you're right. That's 100% true. All you got to do is look in Chicago with Fields when he was there. One of the biggest knocks on Fields is he holds the ball a really long time, so he makes his offensive line look really horrible because he can't read the field. Purdy doesn't have trouble reading the field. So you're right. It is a kind of a threefold cord together. So I think it's what you do and it hasn't been working. You still don't have that championship. So if you're going to take a different approach, I'm all for it. Especially if it's at this point with this group and this coaching staff and this GM, it's like they're going to do whatever it takes to get to get a championship. So if it's a philosophy change, maybe go more offensive heavy in the draft and in free agency, then I'm all for it. Which I think they went pretty defensive heavy in free agency. So I'm not surprised that they went a little bit more offensive heavy in the draft and didn't go D line. That's
Yeah,
just me.
defense absolutely still wins championships. It's just how you construct the defense. It was all about pass rush is going to save the secondary. Well, now I think they start to look at it. Well, when your pass rush is constantly getting held, your pass rush doesn't get those calls, and you need guys on the back end who can cover. I think that's where they're starting to see the change. You don't want to depend on Logan Ryan in those big games. You don't want to have to call guys off of boats and things like that afterwards. You want to have
Yeah.
guys that are going to be able to cover right away, and when you look at the way that they've built this defense, this season. You bring in Gideon, you bring in Rock Yassin, you draft Renardo Green, you draft Malik Mustafa, who I think is going to be in that Jimmy Ward star role under Brandon Staley, and you think that Nick Sorensen, who's a secondaries coach, secondaries guy, he used to play secondary in the NFL. This is going to be a secondary centric team with him and Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley overseeing the game plan with his 2 high safety looks, Nick Sorensen calling the plays. It's a team understanding that we can get enough from our defensive line, but we shouldn't rely on them to get home all the time to save the coverage. Let's get some more coverage sacks in here, and I think that's kind of where they're looking at it.
Well, let's touch on the pick then at in the second round, pick 64, Renardo Green. Just watching the draft and kind of paying attention to it. The one thing that they kept kind of reiterating is sticky in coverage, man to man, little slender. He's almost 6 foot tall, so he kind of fits that range of corner that they like to go with. But I heard did he play? I forget if he played at the Senior Bowl. I forget the report, but they were saying he was locking up, or that during the season last year he was locking up one of the best receivers.
Yes,
in the draft. So
his first game against LSU was against Malik Neighbors, the number 6 overall pick. He had an interception with him. He had him in hell in that game. With Renardo, speaking of philosophy changes, the 49ers were one of the most zone-heavy teams in football. Now, you bring in a guy who's good man-to-man, stays in phase, has that dog, can play and be close, and necessarily not really with interceptions, but he had 14 PBUs last season, which means he makes plays on the ball. Are we going to start to see a little bit more man-to-man? Because you prioritize the secondary now. Can Green be that guy that keeps Diamador Lenore on the inside, and you feel good about the Mooney, Lenore, Green, possibly? And I still believe that the 49ers want to see Darrell Luter. They want to see a little bit from him like before that. I think what this signifies is Samuel Womack and Ambry Thomas are on the clock. But you're going to watch this team go through a change in terms of zone under Steve Wilks and Saleh and obviously D'Amico right before. But now, hey, that works for a little bit. But when your pass rush isn't getting there and you're in the big game against Patrick Mahomes and you have Kelsey and all these guys to really cover with, you're going to need guys who are going to be able to stick close and be able to make that throw harder. So I think, again, philosophy changes all around. I would expect to see this team play a little bit more man-to-man this year as opposed to just sitting in cover 3, cover 4 looks.
Yeah, they've been zone heavy for the majority of, I think, the John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan run here so far. And you're right. It's really predicated on pass rush getting home. And in that Super Bowl, they didn't really get home too much. They did in the beginning. I feel like the Greenlaw injury kind of changed a lot of things. I feel like it took the wind out of their sails. But they were really physical early in the game. But question, this has nothing to do with the draft. How do you feel, and this is just a random question that just came to me, currently how the defensive line, what's your feeling on the defensive line with the, we double dipped with Yatos. We had the 2 defensive tackles that we got in free agency. And then of course, oh my God, his name is escaping me. Floyd, the pass rusher, formerly of the Rams and the Bills. Were you okay that they didn't address the defensive line in the draft with the current way that we kind of went about free agency, kind of double dipping?
I was, as long as there was no glaring, omission, right? If Darius Robinson's there, I feel like, okay, that's something that you really can't pass up, the kid from Missouri. But when you look at the way that they're constructing this line, they expect Nick Bosa to be a little bit closer to the guy that he was before the holdout. Javon Hargrave is still there. Malik Collins is somebody that'll be there on base downs as well, too. Gross Matos feels like a lot like a Menahue, and like Kosuric can unlock him playing inside and outside. Then you've got your veteran guy, Leonard Floyd, who's going to be a situational pass rusher. They still want to see what they have with Drake Jackson, although they're not comfortable with him right now. That's why you continue to add. But you do have a committee, and that's what it's going to take to replace Eric Armstead and to find that edge, that edge counterpart that they've been looking for with Nick Bosa since Steve Ford left. So I do feel fine with it, because when the philosophy is we have guys that are going to do enough to be a pass rush and not rely on them because our secondary is going to be good. I think when you look in tandem, what the 49ers were missing last year was locking the pass rush to the secondary, and Steve Wilks had a hell of a time trying to do that with the wide 9. It felt like it took the entire season for them to click for a little while.
Yep.
They did in spurts, and then eventually it didn't. But what they're looking at now is the emphasis on pass rush is always going to be there, but it can't be the thing that you rely on. So now you can do you can do actually everything that you want to do on pass rush and have those guys there. And now you have people on the back end. I suspect a lot more coverage sacks based on the way that they've been building the secondary.
Let's keep it on secondary. 49ers pick fourth round pick, 124, safety Malik Mustafa. I love the last name, by the way. That's freaking awesome. You can go so many places. You got Tig, who can't be called Tig because he hasn't arrived yet, and Jair Brown, and now you have Mustafa. So there's a whole theme going on. The Niners could really play with that and make some money off of that. But he's another highly touted player coming out of the draft that the Niners look like they might have found themselves a future safety. What's your overall take on Malik Mustafa?
Well, with Tig, that's his name from the neighborhood. So he'll be
Right.
called that forever. Yeah, like that's not a 49ers name that they gave him. That's from him being in Trenton. So like that's gonna stick forever. That's what they're gonna call him. But Malik Mustafa feels like he's gonna fill the Jimmy Ward role in terms of being down in the box, run defender, possible slot guy on certain plays against tight ends, able to go into single high looks, just somebody who moves around a lot. Obviously, a lot of people are worried about the idea of when Jimmy Ward was in that role, they didn't produce as many turnovers as they did last season. I think they're going back to having someone who's a thumper and having someone who's going to be safe. He's a short tackler. He's somebody who doesn't give up a lot in coverage. The only thing that you would say is probably a concern because no prospect is perfect. And the same thing goes for Renardo. Renardo has to clean up the grabbing at the end of the routes, and he has to get better on fades. Those are two of the things that he needs to clean up before he becomes a full-time starter. With Malik, it's about shedding blocks and playing with your hair on fire, but being controlled. Like you don't want to take away the things that are really good about him and what everybody likes, but he does need to play under control a little bit. He can find himself in bad spots by playing a little too fast. But when you look at the way, Hufanga and Jair Brown's scouting reports are almost mirror images. Downhill ball hawks, guys who, going to need some time in terms of like coverage and understanding those things. Those things are both true for both of them. And I think they were both on display, even during Hufanga's all pro season and a little bit last year. But Malik brings a little bit of stability. And I don't think that it necessarily will be this season. But again, he'll probably contribute on special teams this year. And then the next year, you'll see him fall into that star role that's in Brandon Staley's defense.
I find it funny that the Niners, to me, I know you feel the same way. They almost like they draft like they redshirt. They are always redshirting people. They're always preparing for cap moves and cap casualties. They're never of that. I never see the Niners as a team that has they over like they're proactive instead of reactive. They're not like that. That's why the offensive tackle thing is a little alarming to me because I feel like they should be proactive on that too. But where they were sitting and what was available, like you can't just reach for the sake of reaching for an offensive tackle. So in a way, I kind of agree with that. But they are a team that always seems like they always have an answer waiting in the wings. Like for instance, I'll give you two like D Winters and Jalen Graham. Eventually Greenlaw might be expendable. Eventually Fred Warner might get a little bit older or is going to get a little bit older. And the fact that they drafted two guys, one being a later round and one being an earlier guy, they always seem like they're ahead of the curve. So I like that I know this because like when people pop up on when other people follow their teams, they're not exactly like in tune with like draft picks and guys that have been sitting in the wings. And I like to show my expertise with my brother talking about guys like you better watch this guy. For instance, I told my brother, I said, I bet you Miami's going to draft Chop Robinson, right? I didn't follow too much of the draft, but I know that Chop Robinson was somebody that the people kind of projected that the Niners might go at 31. And I told him I'm calling that Miami pick. And sure enough, they drafted him. And my brother's like high fiving me. He's like, thank goodness. So I like to have a little bit of knowledge of my brother when it comes to like all these like random players at the Niners draft that they sit for a while. So I was a little bit shocked that I never saw much from Womack or Luter last year. What was it with Womack? He just wasn't physically ready because I know he was hurt going during the early part of last year.
He's just not an outside guy, and they tried him on the outside. That wasn't really too well. When they tried him on the inside, he played a little well, but they wanted to try Isaiah Oliver because that was a Steve Wilkes thing. But then they really found their guy in Diamador Lenore, and the defense really kicked in after the bye week when they kicked in Diamador Lenore and they put Ambry Thomas out there. They put a plan in place to keep Ambry Thomas safe, not really in harm's way, and they unlock something with Diamador Lenore. That's why they continue to take shots on outside corners. That's why you'll see one of three, Isaac Yidium, Rock Yassin, Renardo Green, one of those guys being out there. But Sammy Womack just can't play outside. He got torched in Atlanta. I think that was really the time that it really showed. He got torched in Atlanta by Marcus Mariota and everybody that he was there, trying to cover. And he just became just a special teams guy. So he's gonna have to show that he's either taking a step or he's going to be a special teams contributor the entire time. It's just tough for him. He's on the clock with Ambry Thomas at this point.
Makes sense. We got a little under 10 minutes left, so I want to start banging out some names here with some players that we've drafted. Overall thoughts on Jacob Cowing, round 4, pick 135. To me, he's kind of I called him a Tyreek Hill light as far as like him being a really small guy, and he has quicks, and those guys are really hard to guard. So I'd be interested. I'm very interested more than even Pearsall in him because he's smaller and because he's quicker. What's your feeling on him?
I love him so much. The Tyreek Hill comp is a little bit. It's very it's very generous. I think what people say when they say that is they look at the pressure that he puts on defenses. I wouldn't expect an impact like that.
Right.
I wouldn't say he's Tyreek Hill. I would say he's more Tank Dell, Tyler Lockett. I would say
Okay.
he's one of those guys. And when you see again the speed motion, he'll be able to use. Cornerbacks are going to be on their feet, but the route running acumen again gets himself open, understands how to run routes. When he sends a DB back on a back pedal, he can hit a comeback and create space. This again, it all lines up with everything that they've been thinking about this entire draft, which is we're going to get Brock Purdy separators. We need to also help the pass rush by getting our quarterback who understands when to get the ball out to their separators that are open. And as long as you give them a second and a half, which is all you're pretty much going to get, even from the best offensive lines in the league, as long as you can give him that, you give him the separators. Jacob Cowing is somebody who I absolutely am over the moon with this pick. I believe that he can be like a Tank Dell, a Tyrell Lockett type player.
A lot of people are sneaky excited about him, which, I saw his measurements when they first drafted him. I'm like, because I'm a decently tall guy. So are you. So like, I like the tall receivers. I like the big tall receivers. 6'3", huge wingspan, giant hands. Like a guy that can just rip your heart out. Like a not Chad Johnson, but Kelvin Johnson from back in the days with the Detroit Lions. Uh, and the Niners are a team that gets hurt a lot. I hate having undersized guys for that, but yeah, I'm excited too. It's different. When I say Tyreek Hill light, I just mean like the ability to just be small and get open and have quicks. It's something the Niners, especially with Debo, and that's why I think Debo's on the clock with this team. Is Niner fans get mad when people accuse Debo of not being a separator. He's not a separator. He's just not. He's a playmaker. He's a guy that they use in multiple ways. So the Niners look like you said, philosophy change. It looks like they're actually going in a direction where they actually have and want receivers to win their routes and get open instead of it having to be schemed open necessarily all the time. So yeah, I'm pretty excited too. Speaking of speed, Isaac Guerendo, round 4, pick 129, running back, big and has like home run hitting ability. They said all I thought of when I saw this pick is Elijah Mitchell. You are on the clock. Feeling similar?
Yeah. At the combine, fastest 40 that a running back's ever had. The only other player that has run a 40 at that weight, at that speed, is DK Metcalf.
He's a beast.
Isaac Guerendo, incredible vertical, incredible broad jump, has no tread on the tires, only one season with over 100 rushing attempts. As soon as he was done testing while we were watching him at the combine, I said, Isaac Guerendo, pack your bags. You will be a San Francisco 49er. Like
Nice.
there's no way you're going to stop Kyle Shanahan from drafting you. And when you look at it, you're absolutely right. It's Elijah Mitchell can't stay on the field, but it's another thing that people are just overlooking because they're just in love with the with the testing and the RAS score, pass protection. And he'll be able to be in there, like, to help again, like in the same way. So they've got to start lightening the load with Christian McCaffrey because they've gotten away with getting him injured. And he hasn't been injured, knock on wood. Not that I believe that's going to happen. It's just, how can you be utilized that much and not have that worry? Now, Elijah Mitchell gets hurt in practice. JP Mason is somebody that, he can run the football, but he's not really a threat to catch the football, and they use him a ton on special teams. But Isaac Guerendo could be a guy that could lighten the load a little bit. The offense can stay in rhythm in terms of play calling and being unpredictable in terms of, well, when Elijah Mitchell's on the field, they're not throwing him the football. But pass pro is the biggest thing. I love this pick. Another home run pick, another speed guy. If you open up a hole for him, they've been missing this speed since Raheem Mostert's been there.
Yes,
I'm in love with this. He's a huge guy who can run fast. I don't know what's not to like about it.
100%. I like the fact that he's a little bit taller, a little bit bigger, and has speed. Because sometimes you have to sacrifice size for speed. The fact that he's kind of a little bit of both is kind of nice. Uh, yeah, the Niners a lot of people who aren't in touch with what the Niners do. The Niners have just the way that they draft. They have a plan in mind, and a lot of people outside of the organization or even the fan base, other YouTubers or whatever, people that do content, they crap on the Niners for what they do and how they draft, but Niners are drafting with a certain philosophy in mind, and it shows. And I don't care what the national media has to say if they give a good grade or not. I know my team. You know the Niners. You know what they draft for, how they draft, what they're thinking. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm always excited for. I never used to be a guy that liked the running game. I was always kind of pro throwing the ball all the time, but I am slightly the type. I've kind of turned into a person who kind of relishes having a team that can just run it down your throat and not even throw the ball. It's a nice problem to have. So, real quick,
Mhm,
Dominic, I don't know how you say it, Punai,
mhm. Pooney.
offensive guard. They drafted him. He was a tackle in college. They're saying guard is probably where he's going to be. What do you think of that pick? I mean, the Niners could have really used a tackle, like a real tackle, but they go and they get kind of a guy who played it in college. He's a little short. I I think I forget if that was him that. And you see that he would probably be better inside. What's your take on him, real quick?
I like it. Over 800 pass blocking snaps at guard.
Yep.
Over 800 the next year. Zero sacks allowed. I don't know if that's good or not, depending on where you play. That's really hard to do. I see him actually being the future center for this team, the future
Okay.
center. Guard, it feels like is a little bit locked up at this point. Um, Pooney could come in and maybe push John Feliciano, but I have a feeling that Kyle's going to do what Kyle does in terms of just going with a guy with experience. Feliciano right guard, Banks at left guard, Brendel there as center, but the 49ers have been chasing the center that they really want since Weston Richburg. And they tried it
Yes.
again with Alex Mack. Alex Mack was here for a year. But I think Pooney is your future center, 100%. But I love this pick as well, too. A guy who he plays better in close quarters, not outside. That's why the tackle thing is that's what he did well in Kansas, but it's not going to work in the NFL, I believe. Just a little bit of short arms, and he's gonna have a tough time there. But he needs to be muddied like in the middle there. That's where he's really going to make his money. And he's a dog in run protection, and he hasn't given up a sack in over 2 years. So
2 years.
yeah,
Yep.
I like this pick as well. When you look at in the three pick of Pearsall, Green, and Pooney, you address the corner, you address the wide receiver, you address the offensive line. I think the 49ers did a bang up job of doing all that, even though they really wanted Roger Rosengarten and they weren't able to get him.
I thought when they drafted him and they projected him to go into guard, I thought, okay, Niners are not going to extend Aaron Banks. This is a future left guard. So, from your perspective, Aaron Banks is he a no doubt resign, restructure, or excuse me, like extending after this
I
year?
I think it's a little too early to say whether he goes or anything like that. I wouldn't bet against him leaving. I really wouldn't. You invest a second round pick in him. I think there were times where you saw the flashes of what he can do, and then at times you saw that there were things that he can improve on. A lot of that stuff, again, in terms of offensive line, is the guy next to you, right? If you're calling out the protections properly, and if you're understanding what the defense is trying to do, then you have a better shot at being in a good spot. I would say that I'd bet right now that Aaron Banks isn't going anywhere. I think the right guard is a little bit more of a concern. Feliciano feels like a 1 year band-aid. We
Yep.
still don't know what Spencer Burford is, if he is anything at all. And I really think, I mean, regardless of what, I know people don't like to hear this, but it's clear the 49ers really like Colton McKivitz. I mean, you sign him to a 2 year deal. You don't draft his immediate replacement or anything like that right away. So there is a possibility that Colton McKivitz could even play better. I know that everybody's down on him, and I understand that you wanted a right tackle, but the thing about drafting a right tackle is he's got to be good as well too. And you can't just draft the right tackle just to draft the right tackle and say you did,
Exactly.
because then he still has to be good. He still has to be
Is he
good
gonna
at
beat
football,
out
and
the
he's still
guy that's there? That's the thing.
right. I mean, just because you took a tackle at 31 doesn't mean that you solved the problem. He still has to be good at football, and I think that's the part that people are kind of are missing a little bit about that. So, I mean, I think with this offensive line, the 49ers feel they're not as down on Colton McKivitz as much as the fan base is, and they feel that he has a chance to improve. But I think if it's going to be anywhere, probably be a right guard if he's getting ready to transition to center.
Real quick, and then we'll get out of here. Any UDFA that you have your eye on, or that
Oh,
caught your eye as far as a signing?
for sure, the center from Michigan. I think again, when you look at all of these guys, including Jarrett Kingston from USC, they all had amazingly fast short shuttle, meaning they're good in small places and short spaces. So again, they still want to utilize those pulling techniques. They still want to utilize getting guys on the outside and making sure that they can get in front. I think 100%. I like him a lot, and obviously, I think the other person is Robinson, Edwin Robinson, I believe is his name, the defensive tackle. He's somebody. I don't think that's his name though.
No,
I know I've been up.
it's Evan Anderson.
Evan Anderson. I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
just been up.
I'm no, I know you've been up all day and you're tired
I've
and
been up
hungry.
like too many days in a row, like flying straight from
Yep.
Detroit and hearing everything, getting all these names together. But Evan Robinson is somebody who I think has a chance to be one of those UDFA guys that you can, say, hey, like, Aziz Al-Shair, Emmanuel Mosley. Wow, like, you really found a guy. He could be one of those guys, especially when you look at how the defensive line needs as many bodies as they can.
And he was actually a lot bigger too. He actually
Yeah.
lost a lot of weight. So he was like close to 350, 360 you don't need him that big, but that I want that guy in the middle. So
Yeah.
thanks for coming on, man. I know you got to run. I appreciate you giving me the time that you did. I always feel smarter when I talk to you. Hopefully we can do this during the season. You are a busy
Yeah.
guy. You got a busy life, but thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you guys coming in here and listening to me and Jason talk for a little bit. I will see you guys tomorrow with Sterling Bennett at 8 p.m. Eastern. Everybody take care. I'll talk to you later. See you.